And so this is what I click, right? But this is where I click when I do the question and answers.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Susan Graham, but I'm here just a minute early, so I'm going to wait till it says 2 o'clock on my machine. And thanks for being here with me this afternoon. You know, we're all in the same world and everything is dependent on what does the computer say is the time. And right now the time says it's 2 o'clock. So I want to welcome you to the Beyond Retirement Learning Series. It's sponsored by my business. It's called Senior Edge Legal. And my name is Susan Graham. I'm a certified elder law attorney. And I got that way because I had to take some extra training and testing and do other things to maintain that status. There are about 500 of us nationwide, so I'm very proud of that designation. In my company, we help seniors create a safe, independent, and financially secure life. So that's our goal, to help our clients. Well, today we're going to be talking about, if you can't wait, take it with you, shouldn't you have control of where it's going to go? Let me start with some just housekeeping things first. This is going to take less than an hour. And if you have questions, there's a space on your screen. On my screen, it's at the bottom that you can type in a question. I'll take some time for those questions at the end. Please make those questions general. I can't answer specific questions about your circumstances. I understand your goal is to get education. And my goal is to not only make sure that you get that education, but also to help motivate you to schedule an appointment with me so that you can move forward on your own plan and accomplish those goals. Now, at the end, a survey will pop up. You'll see this much better than that, but and if you fill that out, that would be great. If you miss that survey, because it has information, many things, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail later. But if you miss that, you'll receive an email with an attachment, a link you can click that will not only have that survey, but also access to this video and also a homework handout. I have to do my lawyer pitch, so this is truly educational. This is not intended as legal advice. Now, this is new. I mean, I love being a lawyer, but technology is not my best thing. But the way this works, I have to do it all myself. I don't have any helpers. So if you see me going in different directions, that's what's going on here. We continually improve. So hopefully after another couple of months, I'll be spiffy at this. You know, I appreciate you spending time with me today. And most people who do that, they do it because they're worried about their future. They're worried about the potential for a crisis and they won't know what to do. They're worried about perhaps they have a health issue or memory loss or are concerned about family conflict. And they don't want to leave a mess when they're behind. They really want to have things happen the way they want. I met with a woman this morning who's been a client a long time. Her husband just died. And she told me that she's a professional worrier. And she said to me a couple of times, you know, I think I should be worrying about something, but I don't know that there's anything for me to worry about because we've all set this out. And I just laughed with her and said, that's the whole point of this. So what we do with our clients is we help them paint the picture of the future they want and actually put that in place. So let's talk about what I have for a topic. If you can't take it with you, shouldn't you have control where it's going? This is a guarantee for you as well as for me. We're going to die. 100% guarantee you're going to die. That's just the way it works. So if you want, you have a bunch of decisions that you need to make to be sure that things happen the way you'd like. The first decision that you need to pay attention to is giving some instructions to those people who are dependent on you. And, not only dependent on you right now, but dependent on you even if you're not here in the future. So we're talking about family members, friends, charities, organizations, businesses, that kind of stuff. Let's talk about if you're a caregiver. A lot of people, unfortunately, are caregivers. I knew they do that with their heart and all the energy they can muster to that, but still, it's a job. So if you're a caregiver and you're no longer there, who's going to care for that person that's so dependent on you? You need to give them some instructions. You need to not only select that person and a backup to that person, but you need to give them some guidance as to what that really means. And what about if you are helping your children or your grandchildren financially, or you're helping them, like I have a lot of clients who are actually the caregivers for their grandchildren. They take them to school, they pick them up after school. Also I have clients who financially help their kids. I don't know how young families manage these days. I mean, the average house in Boise cost $550,000. Geez. The first house I bought cost about $40,000. Now, yeah, I didn't make much money then, but so what? I mean, that was actually affordable. I don't know how people manage. So what happens is the parents and the grandparents kick in and they help them purchase that home, or they help make the rental or mortgage payment, or they help pay for the expenses for the grandchildren. So how are you going to handle that? Again, you need to give some instructions to see how that's going to be taken care of when you're gone, when you die. And then pets. I'm a dog lady. I've always had dogs. I currently have a sweetie who is a rescue dog from the Humane Society. I got her at 8, she's 10, and she's 12 now. And I have a neighbor who's in love with her. I know if I ever lose my dog, she's showing up at that house. And those are the ones I've arranged to take care of her. But you can also make arrangements with the Humane Society. They have an angel care program, but you may have other family or friends. That's another issue of someone who's dependent on you. And if you have a business, wow, take you out of that business, then what's going to happen? Again, you need to think about that. Even if you're having the best day of your life in terms of physically fit, you have high energy, everything's working fine in your world. Well, we all know there's ups and downs in living, just like the stock market right now. You don't always have control over that. So who's going to handle your business? An active business? Or if you have rentals, how's that going to be dealt with? If you have a farm, farms are really complex because often the parents leave they got 4 kids and then one of them dies, but or both of the parents die and they've been farming, but one of their children has actively been involved in continuing the farming. How do you protect that child? I mean, if you divide everything equally among the 4 kids, that's not going to be enough property for the one who's been farming to actually make a living. So that's another issue that becomes a problem in terms of they may not be actually totally dependent on you, but they're dependent on you continuing to hold the farming world together. And if you're gone and you don't have a proper plan, that's going to get divvied up among the 4 kids. And if 3 of them aren't farmers, that creates chaos. Another issue that you need to think about is what I call your stuff, your assets. Now, there are different kinds of assets. I'm going to start with the easy ones. That's the stuff, the painting, the china, the ring, the gun, that kind of thing. And then there's the money, your retirement accounts, your brokerage accounts, your bank accounts. And then there are retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, deferred comp. And then, how do you want to handle that? And then do you want to put what I call strings on the money, meaning someone needs that money to be managed for them when you're not around because they're disabled, because they're too young, because they have bad relationships, that kind of thing. So let's talk about married people. If you're married, what do you want to have? If you die first, what do you want to have your surviving spouse end up with? everything? That's cool. Or is it a second marriage and you want the surviving spouse to be cared for, but you want your money, the money of the first to die in the second marriage, to be available for the surviving spouse so they live a good life for the rest of their lives. But whatever's left over in that portion that belonged to the first to die ultimately goes to the children of the first to die. Not that they get left out and they only go to the children of the second to die. So that's a concern, is how is the string of the management of the money, of the handling of the money, going to actually be dissipated or distributed after somebody dies. And then, of course, when you're both gone, where's it going to go? Now, I've done this a long time, and I have lots of clients, and I really enjoy working with people, but oftentimes husbands and wives can't agree. They can agree, yes, on the first death, it goes a particular way, most often, if it's a first marriage to the surviving spouse. But on the second death, sometimes the husband has a different version of how it should be distributed, and the wife has a different version, and they can't get to the middle. So then we do what I call whoever dies last wins. If the husband dies last, it goes his way. If the wife dies last, it goes her way. So that's a compromise. I mean, you don't have to compromise on these things. I tell my clients that if when you die, this is obviously my funny version of the world, but when you die, my version is there are these fluffy clouds up there, and people sit on a park bench up there and look down and say, oh my goodness, what are they doing down there? And after a while, they get bored with it and then they move on. So all you can do is, if it doesn't happen the way you say you want it to happen, you can haunt them. That is truly the only solution. I was driving down Main Street a couple of winters ago and stopped at a light on 9th Street. And there's an awning on the business right on that corner. And a gentleman was walking across the street, and very elegantly dressed. And the moment he walked under that awning, all the snow slipped down and went to the back of his neck and down his coat. He's looking around like, who's the little hoodlum who did that to me? My version is that's a haunting. So that's pretty much your only remedy. So again, for married couples, if they get on the same page, great. If they don't, that's okay. We can still deal with that. But then how about stuff? Well, that's what people really fight about. I'm talking about who gets the ring, who gets the china, who gets the gun, who gets the painting. And when you set up a plan, you can actually write that down as to who gets those particular items. There was one Supreme Court decision that I read that was all about a meat platter. It was a family in Grangeville, and must have been a pretty elaborate meat platter, maybe a silver one or perhaps a pewter one. The dispute was so intense about this meat platter that it went to the Idaho Supreme Court twice. And the reason I say it was a silver or a pewter one, because if it had been one that was made out of china, I think someplace along the way it would have been smashed. But in this case, anyway, it went up twice to the Supreme Court. There might have been some pretty bitter families in that feelings in that family for it to go that many times to the Supreme Court, because it's pretty expensive to make that kind of a trip. So the other thing that you do is, we're talking about assets. We're talking about money, cash, brokerage accounts. We're talking about retirement benefits. We're talking about farms and rentals and all that kind of thing. So some of the things that are a concern in families, if you have a family cabin, oftentimes it was built by the grandparents, and then they gave it to their 3 children. And now the 3 children are getting old. And then, one of them dies, their share goes to their 2 kids. It gets a mess, gets to be an absolute mess as to how that's going to be handled, who's paying the bills, and how do you figure out who's going to go visit it at which particular time. So that's something that's a critical issue that needs to be dealt with if there's a cabin that you want to have really stay in the family and be shared by the other family members. Sometimes you have a child that you've purchased a home for, or they're renting that home from you. and you want to make certain that they receive that home after you die or you and your spouse die. And then how do you make that square? Do you give the house to the child? And then if you have two children and an equal amount of cash to the other, how do you value that house? And if the house is worth a lot more than the cash that's available, how do you make that come out equal? So those are some other issues. Again, if you have a farm, that's a significant problem if you intend that farm to stay as an operating farm, and only one of the heirs, one of the children or the grandchildren is actually farming that property. How do you make that actually work for them? Being a farmer is very difficult. I mean, I admire those people. I actually inherited a small portion of my grandparents' farm. They sold off most of it when they retired, and it's up in Camas County. And I'm not a farmer, and I rent my ground out, and I'm impressed every year that my tenant actually gets a crop that he can pay me some rent. So it's really difficult with the drought, with the heat, with the commodity prices, with the transportation issues, with the machinery costs. I mean, that's pretty impressive that someone can make a farm productive and actually cash flow properly. So you may want to be certain, if you have a farm or a business or something like that, that in fact you put in some protective mechanisms for the person who's running that business or farm and still provides fairly for the other family members. And then there's strings on the money. What I call strings on the money is, let me tell you what the law says. The law says young people are grown-ups, adults, at the age of 18. I missed the opportunity. Years ago, I saw a magnet. I also saw a bumper sticker that I could have put on my car that says, hire an 18-year-old today when they know everything. And they do. But the problem is they're stupid. They're sweet and they're very nice. But the problem is they have no life experience and they think they're so smart and they go out and make stupid decisions. So normally when someone's a young person, we say the money is managed for them until they're 30. There are studies that show young people finally wake up around age 30. That means hold down a job, keep their car payment current, don't bounce your checks, move out of the parents' home, and so forth. There are some people that will never be able to manage the money. You may want to have it managed for them for a lifetime. Some people are developmentally disabled. Some people are in really dreadful relationships. And while they're in that relationship, you don't want them to receive the money outright. I have clients whose children are in the state penitentiary. Of course, that's not what you want. I have some clients who have children or grandchildren who have drug or alcohol problems. So there are ways that can be addressed so that that money just doesn't totally disappear and end up going down the drain. If you are married, and often I see this in a second marriage, again, you want to provide for your spouse, but you want ultimately the money that you came into the marriage when you're both gone to go to the children of the first to die. And so you can set that up. You can say that, yes, it's going to be there for the benefit of my spouse. And that surviving spouse gets all the income from that money and can take the principal if necessary. But what's left over definitely will go to the children. So you don't have to worry that your children will be disinherited. And then there's pets. Like I said, I'm a dog lady. And Leona Helmsley, some of you may remember, she was a woman who was in the Northeast in New York City who had a hotel chain. And some people said she wasn't a very nice lady, but she was certainly wealthy. And when she died, she left millions of dollars to her dog that was called Trouble. An interesting name for a dog. Anyway, millions of dollars. Now, I don't care how young or how old that dog was. I mean, millions of dollars, even eating the chopped beef every night, is not going to be that expensive. Certainly not millions of dollars worth. So that ended up in court and the judge cut that down quite a bit, but nonetheless, you can certainly provide for your pets. The third big issue that you need to think about is who's going to be in charge when you're gone, when you die. Again, the guarantee for each of us, me included. And when you talk about people in charge, I'm talking about people in charge when you can't do it. So that means, of course, you're dead, you can't do it. Also, when we do planning, we talk about what happens should you decline as you age, and you need help making financial decisions, and you also need help with health decisions. So that's another issue. But let's just talk about the money part, the assets part. So who's going to be in charge when you're dead? Well, a lot of people look to their family, but the criteria that you need to pay attention to for these people that you nominate, this is not an honor for them. This is a job, and it's a serious job. Do they have the skills? Do they really have the skills? Do they have the understanding of how to handle these assets? And do they have the time? And are they going to be fair? Are they actually going to do it the way you have said and follow the instructions you have created? Or if you don't have any instructions, will they follow the law that's required under the state of Idaho for the default provisions if you don't have an estate plan? And recognize that they're entitled to be paid. Everybody's entitled to be paid. And how much is that? Again, you can, if you plan ahead, you can put some parameters around that, but certainly they're entitled to be paid. But they need to get it done. I have some death administrations that I'm working on right now. And the people who were nominated and actually took the job, worked on it for about 1 week and haven't done another thing. And months and months and months have gone by, and the other heirs are saying, wait, what's going on? What's happening here? Has the house been sold? What are the expenses have been paid? When am I getting my money? And the clients that I have, the ones that were hired to do this job, because they were nominated by the dead person, they're not talking to me. Excuse me, which is fine. They don't have to talk to me. The only problem is I'm not going to represent them if they don't talk to me. So I am filing papers with the court to say, hey, judge, I'm not doing this anymore because my client won't talk to me and I can't get the job done. So you need to think about when you appoint someone, will they really get it done? Do they have the skills? Do they have the time? And are they going to be thorough and actually accomplish that? Now, the usual choices are a surviving spouse if you're married. I'm not saying that you want the usual choices, but I'm just saying that this is what a lot of people choose. Oftentimes, people choose one child. They have children, that's a responsible child, the one that's always stepped up and seems to have the skills and time to do it. Sometimes I have clients who appoint multiple children, especially if it's a second marriage, they appoint one from each marriage. Or, I had one client recently who appointed 3. You need to understand, if you appoint multiple people to wind up your affairs when you're gone, if they can't agree, if you have 3, if 2 out of 3 agree, then the law says they win. If you only had 2, then you've got a stalemate. And are you really helping anybody? Because they both have to sign everything. So they're not sitting, in the same town and get along with one another. That really is awkward. But nonetheless, sometimes people do that. So you can appoint another family member, a sibling, a cousin, a distant relative, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, a friend. This is a job, remember, and it takes time. And it's not an honor, it's a job. So really think seriously about who you're going to appoint. And if you're appointing humans, name a backup. The first person isn't always available. They first of all say, I'm not doing this. They die in the meantime. They don't have the skills, they don't want it. So you need to have an alternative in case the first person can't do it. The other thing is you appoint a professional. There are professionals who do this, professional fiduciaries. Fiduciary means somebody who's responsible for money, but has to be thorough about it, honest about it, and conservative about handling the money. So they can't, in the meantime, while they're winding everything up, take $200,000 and buy a chicken farm. I mean, that's ridiculous. Or they can't really take $500,000 and buy a cryptocurrency. I mean, that's way too risky. Now, if it goes up in value, nobody's going to complain. But if it goes down in value, that individual is going to be personally responsible for the loss of that money, because it's not responsible to invest money for somebody else that way. You can be foolish with your own money or risky with your own money. You can't do that when you're doing it for somebody else. Okay, so again, you can't take it with you. That's just the way it goes. You know, there's a joke about, at least I heard this years ago, about some rich client dying and had $1 million, and the $1 million was stuffed in the coffin. And at the funeral, this is a lawyer joke, the lawyer, you know, looked at the open coffin, wrote a check for $1 million and took all the cash out. You know, it doesn't work like that. You can't take it with you. So how do you make this a reality? You know, we talked about the things you need to be concerned about. So how do you make that actually happen? A wish does not make it happen. Talking to people does not make it happen. I don't care if you were very clear in your statements, or a video does not make it happen. Our legal system just ignores all that stuff. You have to take certain legal steps, formal steps, for your estate plan to be enacted the way you want. Well, first of all, it needs to be in writing. Okay, so let's talk about the easy things. The beneficiary. You have life insurance, or if you have life insurance, you get to name who's the beneficiary, who gets that $50,000 policy when you're gone. So you say, I name my spouse. Or something else, my estate, the Idaho Humane Society, whatever you want to say. And then you see if that first person didn't get it, first primary beneficiary didn't get it, then who's the alternate? So if you say my spouse and the spouse predeceases you, where does it go? If you say it goes to my 3 kids, cool. But what happens if they're under age 18? Under age 18, they're not considered adult. We don't know who's going to manage it for them. And when they hit age 18, they're going to get the money. And again, they're going to think they went to Las Vegas, they won the lottery. They have no understanding of how hard it is to earn money and have enough left over that you can set aside as savings. So that doesn't really work well. The other problem, you can name a beneficiary on life insurance, annuities, and retirement benefits. And retirement benefits are handled differently. There's a new law that went into place a couple of years ago. It was called under the Secure Act. It relates to inherited IRAs. So your IRA, once you reach a certain age, the government said you have to take out a minimum distribution. I say IRA, that's my shorthand description of retirement benefits. Individual retirement accounts, Roth or regular ones, 401ks, 403bs, deferred comp, all those kinds of things. So while you're alive, you have to take them out under certain rules. And if your spouse inherits from you, they're stuck with those same rules. But when you're both dead and they go to somebody else, they're called inherited IRAs. And if it's a human that's getting them, depends on the kind of human, but basically the rules are they have to pay the tax within 10 years. If you name a human, you say half of my IRA goes to my kids and half of it goes to the Humane Society, that accelerates the tax. It means they have to pay the tax much sooner. And if you say my estate is the beneficiary of my IRA, my retirement money, that too accelerates the tax. So there's some tax issues in here that you need to be careful about on beneficiaries for retirement accounts. What else do you do? I mean, that's just, a beneficiary is just on those kinds of assets. You could make your bank accounts, POD accounts, paid on death accounts, or transfer on death accounts, TOD accounts. And those, again, when you die, somebody can go down to the bank with a death certificate that says, see, you're dead. And the bank will write out a check to whoever is named as the recipient of that account, as the beneficiary. But again, we got the problems of, oops, maybe somebody too young is getting that money, and maybe somebody died before you. And so maybe it didn't come out the way you wanted it to be. But then we've got lots of other assets. You know, I'm just talking about the things with beneficiary designations. You've got a house, you've got a cabin, you've got a business. How are we, you've got a brokerage account. How are those going to be handled? Well, again, you need a formal written agreement, statement, something. And the way you do that is with a last will and testament. You have to be over age 18 and you do it in a formal manner, and you can say who's in charge and who's getting the money and under what kind of circumstances, or you can have a revocable trust and do the same thing in that with some other documents. And we've talked about that in other programs. So if you want to go into that in more depth, I'm not doing that today, but you can go back and look at those other videos. But you get to select when you have a last will and testament or a revocable trust are the two normal ways, most common ways that people do estate planning, formal ones, is you get to decide who's in charge when you can't do it anymore, and who's the backup, who inherits from you, is it's individuals or charities or something else, and what kind of strings on the money do you want to put on that? Do you, after you're dead, do you really want the money to go outright to that individual, or do they have to wait, or is the money managed for them for their lifetimes? And you address what if somebody dies first. I had one lady, it's a widower, and had one son. And she said to me, I want everything to go to my son. I said, that makes sense. Son had no children and he wasn't married. And then I said, who's in charge? And she says, my son. I said, that's great. Okay. Now I said, what if your son predeceases you? She says, it won't happen. I said, well, I've been doing this a long time. And if you just open up the newspaper and you look at the obituary page, people die of all ages. So let's just humor me. Tell me, if your son, God forbid, should first die and then you die later, who gets your property? She says, I'm not addressing that. And I said, okay. I said, the reason I'm pushing, and I do push, is if somebody predeceases you, often the last thing you're going to think about is, oh my God, I need to update my estate plan? No, people don't think about that. They're grieving. They're so upset about the loss of this loved one. The other thing is, they may think they've already got it covered, so they never bother to look at their documents. The other thing is, it could be they're demented, mentally or physically, can't make the change, and then they die. And we don't have a backup. So then we have to open up the Idaho code and say where it's going to go. So you usually can do better than letting the Idaho legislature decide how your property is going to be distributed. So if you do nothing, that's what happens. So if you don't take some formal steps to actually have the plan in place that you want, that paints the picture of your future, then the Idaho state law takes care of that. And they decide if you're married, how the property is going to be distributed, and if you're single, how the property is distributed. Now, what if you have a dysfunctional family? I can compete with the best of them for a dysfunctional family, and pretty much all of us, unfortunately, are competitive about that. We all have dysfunctional families. So if you haven't done anything, that just opens up the door for trouble. And if you have a formal written plan, you can cut that off. You can really eliminate those kinds of hassles. You also get to decide who inherits from you. You get to choose instead of the legislature saying who's going to choose. You get to decide who's in charge. If you don't, the Idaho legislature figures that out. And ultimately, sometimes it comes down to a total stranger who can manage things. If you have minor children, not minor grandchildren, because normally the grandparents are not the legally responsible persons for them, the legal responsible guardians. But if you have minor children and they're under age 18, somebody needs to be the guardian for those children to handle making decisions for them, not only financial, but other decisions, health and schooling and so forth. And so who's going to be the guardian? Again, you would do a better job than the state figuring out who would that be. You don't want, this is my personal opinion, but at 99% of the time, you do not want an 18-year-old to inherit money with no strings. There are some, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a scientist, but people tell me it's around in the middle 26 or something like that, that your brain is finally set, so you actually make better decisions. Anyway, and also if you haven't made a plan, you can trigger accelerated taxes, extra taxes that don't need to be paid. So why don't people do this? Why don't people actually follow through? Once you decide, and you get to decide, this is the best part about it. That's what I love about doing estate planning. I help people create and paint the picture of the future they want. And why don't they do that? Well, the easiest thing is, I'll just put it off. I'll get to it some other day. Well, thankfully, nobody tells us the day we're going to die or the day we're going to become incompetent and not able to care for ourselves. So that's really not a good thing to say, well, I'll keep waiting. I'll get to it someday. So let's try, but the other reason that a lot of people don't do it, they think it's just way too expensive. They don't know what that really means, but they think it's way too expensive. And so let's talk about cost. Let's talk about value and price. I looked up yesterday on the internet, what does it cost to buy a Ford F-150 pickup? The most favorite pickup in this country. So the minimum price is $44,000. And it goes up to $95,000. That's what I call a chrome pickup. It's got every little whistle and bell on it. I said, well, what are the extras? You know, a $44,000 pickup, that sounds pretty expensive to me anyway. You know, so the base model. So if you want something extra, what are some of the extra things? A running board. A running board. Now, I've had pickups in the past. I can't get into a pickup if it doesn't have a running board. You know that what that means is it's a little step, but you can get into the cab. I have some shorter friends and women friends who can't even get into my SUV that I drive around the town. So, you know, a running board is an extra thing. Side airbags is an extra thing. And they have a lot of other things that we would regard as normal that are extra. So 44,000 is not going to get you the deluxe or even practical pickup truck. You're going to have to pay extra for that. So how does that relate to estate planning? Well, in our office, you're not just going to get the $44,000 basic truck. You're going to get the running boards. You're going to get the airbags. You're going to get the other things that you need to make the whole thing work. And what we talk about in our office to help our clients is we not only deal with death, which is the guarantee for each of us, we also deal with disability. That's something we all ignore. We never want it to happen to us. It's not going to happen to me. You know, people in my family didn't get demented, you know, so that's not an issue. They didn't have arthritis, not an issue. Well, you know, look at the car accidents, look at the fall down. You know, when you fall, and you end up in a hospital, you really have a 50% chance of dying in a very short time period. So when we plan, we talk about setting up estate plans that deal with right now, how things are going, when they're good, and what happens, God forbid, if you become disabled and when you die, so that we make it smooth for the family or the people you want to care for you to handle these things. Do that smoothly and without court interference. If you go, you can do it yourself. You know, you can go, I looked at the legal Zoom fees yesterday. If you do a basic will, it's $87. And if you do a basic trust-based estate plan, it starts at $279 to a maximum of $400. Cool. You get some documents. Do you know they're going to work for you? Do you know they're going to work for you the day you need them? The day you need them is when you can't change them. The day you need them is when you, God forbid, become incompetent, mentally or physically can't contract, or the day you die. So what we do in our office is we sit down with our clients and understand, visit with them about what do they want for their future. Now in the good days, what happens should they become incompetent, and what happens when they die? Who's in charge? How do we handle all those assets? Our fees usually range between $5,000 to $10,000. Just depends on what you want to do. And that allows you to protect your spouse or your family, protect your children, make it happen the way you want, make the right people be in charge. So if you like, please think about, and I'll show you how in a few moments to partner with us to create a plan that paints the picture of the future you want. Now, I have a little bit more to do to share with you, but let me look at any questions that you might have. So now I have to do my thing. Okay, I have one. How soon should you lock the house, or how soon should the locks to the house be changed? When someone dies, the best thing to do is change the locks immediately. When I first started to be an attorney, I had a much senior attorney tell me about the 24-hour free steel rule. You know, I just graduated from law school. I said, there's no such thing. I never heard of that. What's that? Well, when someone dies, the neighbors or the relatives frequently back up to the house with a pickup truck and take out whatever they want. It's totally illegal. They're not supposed to do that. But then you can't file an insurance claim for theft unless you actually file a police report that says somebody stole it. and it never happens. So first thing to do is, if you're in charge, if you're the one who's responsible to take care of these matters, is change the locks. Get the keys from the other people, but I don't care about that. Change the locks, and they've got these automatic garage door buttons that you push, do something to the garage door so it can't be automatically open, put some boards or bolts or something on it, you call one of the locksmith companies. They know how to handle that. I'm a lawyer. This is not my expertise, but I am saying do it immediately, because you have a responsibility, to make certain that things stay intact. And another question. Oh, this is a wonderful one. Do people still store money behind paintings or in books? Oh, yes, and many other places. One of the questions I ask my clients when they come in and we start working on their plan is, I ask them, do you hide things? I actually have clients who literally bury money in the backyard, and then they get demented or die and nobody can find it. So that's not a good idea. If you bury it, I don't care, but you need to leave some kind of treasure map to somebody that you trust to show them where that is. Yes. And the problem is, I've had clients who pin their jewelry to the lining of the curtains in their living room. I have clients who put a $50 in every book that they have. And of course, there's always the sugar jar or that toolbox in the garage. So, if you're really going to do that, that's fine, but please tell someone, or if you don't tell them, at least say, go to this spot, go to my top left-hand drawer in my desk, and that's where you'll find the instructions of where I hide those things. Because should you be demented or the day you die, that stuff is either going to end up with the wrong person or get tossed out with the trash. Now, let me give you one last story about that. I had a couple, they were here in my office, and I asked that same question, do you hide anything? And the two of them looked at one another. And as soon as they do that, I've been doing this a long time. It's pretty obvious to me, yes, they do, but they didn't really want to say anything. And I told them, I'm not coming to your house. I got plenty of things to fill my days. This is not what I'm doing. Well, they told me they had the heating system changed in their house, and they had these big ducts in the basement, and they no longer were being used. So they put $100,000 of silver and gold and Cougarins in those ducts. I hadn't told anybody, hadn't told their children, hadn't told the person who's supposed to take over, none of that stuff. And I told them, what's going to happen is the new house owner is going to end up with that, or some repairman is going to come there someday and say, oh, this is cool, and it ends up in his pocket or her pocket. So, that's not, I don't care if you hide stuff, that's fine, but just be sure that somebody knows where it is so it doesn't end up in the wrong hands or get tossed out with the garbage. So that's it for questions. So let me, now, I have to push these buttons. Okay, now, just have a few more things. Let me make a suggestion to you. You had something else you could have done this afternoon other than listening to me, and I'm very pleased that you are, and that I had this opportunity to share information with you. But I have a suggestion for you. As soon as we finish with this, or even right now, but maybe it's the best after we finish with this, take 2 minutes. Now that's not very long. I want you to write down 3 steps you can take to accomplish your personal planning goals. Okay, I don't care what that is. Just write down those 3 steps. Because if you write them down statistically, and they've done all kinds of studies, they say you double your chance of actually accomplishing those goals. So do it. Don't leave it in your head. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually, even when I go to multiple planning, it seems to me at least a couple of times a month, I take continuing education classes to stay current in this area of the law. And I always write notes. It's just a way for me to help retain that information. So write down those 3 steps you can take to accomplish your personal planning goals. The next thing you might want to do, and I encourage you to do this, is complete the survey. What will happen is at the end of this meeting, when you sign out, or just before you sign out, I don't know, you click something, this survey will pop up. And you can complete that. And what you get to decide on that survey is, first of all, there's some ways to critique me, which I greatly appreciate, because I do these presentations monthly, and from comments from people like you, I change the topics and change the approach to make these to make them better for you. The other thing is, if you would like to visit with me, indicate that, and someone from my office will contact you. There's no charge for the first 30 minutes if we have a potential for being a good fit. And during that 30 minutes, we'll talk about what you want to accomplish and how we can get that done and what it costs in terms of time and money. And then also there's a link on that survey to get to the free legal forms I have on my website. And they're living health documents, end of life decisions, health powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney, that kind of thing. So if you fill out that survey, it automatically comes back to me. And then also, if you decide you want to visit with me, someone from my office will contact you. If you miss it, don't worry, it'll come to you tomorrow as an email attachment with a link. So again, you can complete that survey. You will also receive a copy of this video, and there will be a handout for the presentation that we made today. So just hitting some high points of what we discussed today. Well, the next time I'm going to have one of these programs is November 17th at 2 o'clock. And the topic will be about, if you're married, what happens when you die, if you're the first or the last one to die. So I really thank you very much for spending this time with me. And I admire you for taking the steps to get information. But I encourage you to take the additional step and actually put the future that you want to be for yourself in place. And for that, you have to take some formal steps. So I look forward to meeting some of you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. And now I have to turn more buttons off.